Lunar base Horizon bustled like a metropolis on the verge of dawn. Cargo shuttles glided into docking bays, their hulls shimmering under artificial lunar light. Humans and aliens alike thronged the main concourses, exchanging greetings in a half-dozen languages while security drones hovered overhead, scanning for any sign of trouble. Though the station hummed with commerce and diplomacy, an undercurrent of restlessness seemed to permeate every corridor. Nadia Abbott, chief diplomatic officer for the Terran Defense Council, surveyed the scene from a high balcony encircling the station's grand atrium. At 32, Nadia already carried the weight of countless negotiations on her shoulders. She cut a slight figure in her neatly pressed uniform, her posture poised and confident as she peered down at the swirling crowd. Long ago, she'd learned to read tension in a room, and today, she sensed it everywhere. A curt summons came over her earpiece. "Officer Abbott, the Dietol delegates have arrived for arbitration in Conference Chamber 4. Nadia responded immediately, politely excusing herself from a half-finished conversation with a junior aide. Yet, even as she made her way through winding corridors, she couldn't ignore the fact that station security checks had recently doubled. Guards with serious expressions had replaced the usual polite attendants, and rumors of clandestine projects drifted through mess halls like half-seen ghosts. The Dietol dispute proved straightforward at first, a contract misunderstanding over trade routes spanning Mars to the Orion colonies. Nadia deftly pieced together the details from both parties, her calm voice and gentle directives placing the delegates at ease. With carefully chosen words, she brokered a temporary compromise, one that would stand until final regulations were ratified by the Council. The delegates left with gratitude in their glowing eyes, but the tension outside their small chamber remained, coiling tighter by the hour. On her way to file the session's transcript, Nadia glimpsed a peculiar sight. Two Terran officers, uniform collars adorned with a distinctive silver insignia she didn't recognize, speaking in hushed tones against a wall. She inched closer, trying not to appear intrusive. Her heartbeat quickened when a single phrase slipped through the static hush of their conversation: Project Aegis. Before she could glean more, one officer glanced in her direction. Their startled eyes locked for a moment before he clamped his mouth shut, and both men swiftly departed. Back in her office, Nadia stood by a wide viewport overlooking Earth, a looming blue-green sphere bathed in the distant sun's glow. She tapped her console, searching official archives for any reference to Project Aegis. Nothing. Not so much as a whisper in the Council's records. Nadia's fingers hovered over the controls for a long moment. Why the secrecy? Why now? Troubling questions unfurled in her mind, but the responsibilities of her position demanded she refocus. Another trade dispute awaited. Another late meeting on lunar governance was scheduled. Life on lunar base Horizon carried on as usual, for now. Yet an uneasy intuition told her that the tranquility was about to fracture. Something far bigger and far more dangerous than she could imagine was stirring in the shadows, and she could almost feel its presence reverberating beneath the station's polished floors. With a weary exhale, Nadia straightened her uniform and left her office, determined to keep the peace for as long as possible, even if a hidden threat lurked just beyond the far side of the moon. A shrill emergency klaxon cut through the meditative stillness of lunar base Horizon's corridors. Nadia Abbott jolted upright in her office, heart pounding. Every hollow screen within sight flickered to life, broadcasting a message in the Terran Defense Council's official emblem. She could see officers sprinting down the hallway, confusion etched across their faces. Something big had happened, something bigger than another trade dispute or routine security alert. She stepped out into the concourse, joining a huddled mass of humans and aliens, all craning their necks toward the nearest holo display. The Council's crest receded, replaced by the imposing, razor-sharp gaze of Admiral Kronos Durov. Decked in a sleek black uniform, he stood on what looked like the command deck of a starship, far more advanced than any vessel Nadia had ever seen. The hush in the concourse was absolute, broken only by ragged breathing or the disbelieving stutters of the watchers. "My fellow Terrans," Durov began, voice echoing through the station's loudspeakers. "This is Admiral Kronos Durov addressing you from our newly commissioned flagship, the ESS Aegis. For too long, Earth has worn a mask of vulnerability, feigning compliance, seeking alliances that did little to solidify our true safety. Today, we cast off that pretense. A swirl of camera angles revealed a gleaming armada orbiting beyond Neptune. Colossal battleships, bristling with advanced weaponry, hung against the blackness of space in a silent show of force. Nadia's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. The hulls bore unfamiliar markings, and their architecture deviated from the standard Terran designs she knew by heart. These were warships on a scale Earth had never publicly acknowledged. Behold, Durov continued, the Terran secret fleet. Years of research, covert development, and unwavering dedication have given us the deterrent we require in an increasingly hostile galaxy. Henceforth, no threat, alien or otherwise, shall challenge humanity's rightful stance in this universe. Pandemonium erupted in the concourse. A group of Andar merchants snarled at the screens, demanding to know if their ambassador had known about this secret. A reptilian-scaled Tarsa woman slapped her tail against the floor, hissing in alarm. Human civilians backed away from their former alien colleagues, eyes fearful. Even among Earth's own officials, heads snapped together in hushed arguments. Nadia felt the intangible weight of trust shattering. Every fragile alliance Earth had painstakingly built, now teetering on the brink. She forced herself to stay calm, urging the crowd to remain orderly as the broadcast looped, replaying the image of Earth's unstoppable warships. Her earpiece crackled with frantic updates. A once cordial delegation from the Lyran Alliance had stormed out of a security briefing. The council was in chaos, half of its members blindsided by this sudden revelation. The corridor's overhead lights flickered as the station's power grids reeled under the simultaneous transmissions. Officer Abbott snapped a voice behind her. It was Counselor 1, face flushed from sprinting. You're needed in the diplomatic center at once. The alien representatives are furious. We need you to prevent a total meltdown. Nadia inhaled, struggling to center herself. Not 24 hours ago, she had overheard whisperings of Project Aegis, but never in her wildest imagination had she foreseen a fleet of such magnitude. A creeping dread curled in her gut. She had always believed Earth aspired to peaceful exploration, that her diplomatic efforts were guided by sincerity. Now, she feared everything might have been a facade. As she moved swiftly toward the diplomatic center, Nadia caught one final glimpse of Admiral Durov's unwavering expression on a flickering display. He wore a victor's smile, one that chilled her to the core. For all its impressive grandeur, this secret fleet threatened to crack the fragile unity of the galaxy. And in the aftermath, it would be her job to pick up the pieces, or watch as millennia of progress slid into the void. The sprawling corridors of Lunar Base Horizon felt suddenly narrower, as if the station itself were constricting under the collective weight of anger and distrust. Wherever Nadia Abbott turned, she found terse whispers and pointed glares. Alien diplomats who had once strolled the concourses with quiet confidence now gathered in tight knots, their expressions hardened by shock and betrayal. Inside the diplomatic center, the atmosphere was bordering on hysteria. The lights were muted, perhaps intentionally, as though dulling the gleam might lessen the sting of recent revelations. Holographic globes hovered about the room, displaying a tangle of trade routes, alliances, and territorial claims. Now, all in jeopardy. Counselors argued in urgent tones, their voices echoing against the curved walls. Alien delegates pressed forward with furious demands, their translators churning out clipped, outraged statements. Nadia crossed the threshold and was immediately swarmed by pleas for explanations. A Shuian envoy, spindly and tall, with luminescent swirls across its delicate skin, gripped her by the wrist. "We believed Earth to be our partner," came the reedy, quivering translation. "Now we find your government was building warships in secret? This is a betrayal of galactic trust." She gently extricated herself, voice steady. "I understand your frustration. Please, let me hear your concerns one at a time. I'll do my best to seek answers." But the demands arrived in an unceasing torrent, too many voices at once. She glimpsed the thick tension in the eyes of other ambassadors, some brandishing data slates with threats of severed treaties. A few stormed out entirely, vowing to relay Earth's duplicity to their homeworlds. As the hours dragged on, counselor when tried in vain to maintain order at the head of a massive, circular conference table. "We can settle this in a civilized manner," he insisted, slamming his gavel. Yet no one seemed placated. The mention of Admiral Durov's name sparked fresh waves of rage. If the Terran Defense Council had sanctioned this secret fleet, what else might Earth be hiding? Amid the chaos, Nadia managed small victories. She convinced a handful of delegates to hold off on drastic measures, offering to personally petition the Council for transparency. But each promise felt like a flimsy bandage on a gaping wound. Even Earth's own representatives were divided. Some applauded Durov's decisive show of force, viewing it as overdue in a galaxy rife with potential threats. Others worried that brandishing this hidden power had irreparably shattered alliances they spent decades cultivating. Halfway through the day, Nadia stepped out for a stolen moment of respite, pressing her forehead against the cool surface of a corridor window. Outside, beyond the lunar horizon, Earth shone in its familiar blues and greens, a cradle of life so many species regarded with curiosity and, until now, tentative respect. She exhaled, recalling the day she first became a diplomat. She had believed that honesty and good faith could knit civilizations together, bridging differences with dialogue. Now she wondered if Durov's power play had rendered her life's work meaningless. A melodic chime interrupted her thoughts, another urgent summons. Nadia squared her shoulders. Whatever disagreements brewed within the council, she had to stave off a complete diplomatic collapse. Earth's newly revealed might had slammed a wedge between Terrans and their allies, and the fault lines were widening with every passing hour. As she hurried back toward the diplomatic center, she silently vowed to do whatever it took to halt the bleeding trust. Yet in her heart, a prick of dread insisted that once fractured, the fragile bonds holding the galaxy together might never fully mend. Nadia Abbott sat in a dimly lit corridor cafe, hands wrapped around a mug of steamy synth tea. Outside the nearby window, the moon's dusty plains stretched into distant darkness. It was the first moment of quiet she'd managed all day. The diplomatic center had churned her through a gauntlet of furious alien envoys, divided council members, and frantic aides. And though she excelled at holding composure, her nerves were frayed. She took a hesitant sip of the tea, closing her eyes in a brief attempt at calm. Inevitably, her mind drifted to the year she was 16, a memory she tried so hard to bury. Back then, Earth had only begun reaching into the solar system with fledgling outposts. She recalled seeing on the news feed a catastrophic skirmish near the Ceres colony, a resource-rich asteroid settlement hotly contested by multiple parties. Nadia's family had close friends stationed there. She'd never forget the images of battered ships and flickering distress calls, nor the anguish in her parents' eyes when the colony went dark. That first taste of interplanetary violence had awakened a fierce idealism in her, a vow that she would help steer humanity, and hopefully the galaxy, away from needless bloodshed. Now, as she cradled her mug, she couldn't shake the sense that Earth teetered on the brink of a mistake far worse than Ceres. Over the past few hours, the entire cosmic community had recoiled in horror at Admiral Kronos Durov's dramatic unveiling of Earth's secret fleet. Allies who once cooperated in cautious harmony felt betrayed. And although Nadia wanted to believe there had to be a rationale behind Durov's actions, some dire necessity, each new confrontation left her doubts gnawing deeper. A gentle chime pulsed from her wrist calmed the readout, displayed a code known only to top-ranking officials. Nadia set her cup down and hurried toward the station's restricted levels, the corridors transitioning from the open bustle of the public sector to the quiet hush of sealed-off council offices. After a checkpoint scan, she entered a small briefing room lit by a single overhead fixture. Waiting inside, tall, severe, radiating command, was Admiral Kronos Durov himself. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His gaze was unyielding, his brow furrowed as though carrying the weight of entire planets. Nadia had never seen him up close before, despite her role in the diplomatic corps. She immediately grasped why so many subordinates quailed under his stare. "Nadia Abbott," he said in a measured, resonant tone. "Chief Diplomatic Officer. I've read your file. You have an impeccable record." She offered a guarded nod. "Thank you, Admiral. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "You'll discover in due time," he began, motioning her to sit. that the galaxy is not the welcoming place you might imagine. Not all conflicts can be quelled by negotiation. She took the offered seat but held his eyes. And you believe this secret armada is the only way to ensure Earth's security? He tapped a small control on the table, bringing up a holographic schematic of the ESS Aegis and its sister ships. The advanced weaponry, quantum jump drives, layered shield systems. It was breathtaking and terrifying all at once. Our race can't afford weakness, he said. You've seen how quickly alliances shift. All it takes is one hostile species turning its sights on Earth, and centuries of human advancement could vanish overnight. Nadia interlaced her fingers, forcing a calm she didn't fully feel. I understand the need for deterrence, but the secrecy, unveiled so abruptly, it's causing the very panic we wanted to avoid. An edge crept into Durov's voice. You're assuming we've wanted to avoid panic. The galaxy should be uneasy, Ms. Abbott. That's precisely what keeps them from foolish aggression. His statement hung in the air like a drawn blade. Nadia could almost feel the pulse of raw power Durov wielded with an unshakable conviction. A part of her saw logic in it. Hadn't history proven that might often deter would-be conquerors? Yet she couldn't suppress the knot in her stomach. She remembered Ceres, the blackened colony stations, the heartbreak that followed. But if we fear others, and others fear us, how do we ever build genuine trust? Durov's jaw tightened. Trust is a nice notion, but a fragile one. Listen to the news feeds, Officer Abbott. There are already rumors of alien coalitions forming against us. That alone justifies our need to act now. And your plan? Nadia asked. Her voice wavered with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Are you proposing we stand ready to fire first if they show the slightest threat? I'm proposing we ensure they never dare show that threat, Durov said, shutting off the hologram. Earth stands on the cusp of greatness. We cannot flinch. The conversation left Nadia hollow. She parted ways with the Admiral, walking the sterile corridors back toward the diplomatic center, her mind swimming. Durov's absolute certainty rattled her. While she couldn't dispute every point he made, something felt fundamentally wrong about forcing the galaxy's hand through fear alone. Did Earth's survival truly hinge on intimidation? Back at her office, she locked the door and dimmed the lights. She needed a moment to weigh the unthinkable, going against the very council she served, risking her career, and perhaps even her safety, to seek a peaceful alternative. Could she work quietly to assure alien leaders that negotiation was still possible, that Earth wasn't launching a crusade, but merely unveiling a strategic deterrent? It was a fine line to walk, yet if anyone could navigate that line, it was her. Nadia pulled up encrypted communication lines, inputting contact codes belonging to delegates she trusted from various star systems, old allies, personal acquaintances she'd earned respect from over the years. If Earth's official channels were overshadowed by Admiral Durov's unilateral display, she would forge another path, off the record. She typed quickly, her fingers trembling at the gravity of what she was about to do. Messages sent, she leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. An image of the ruined colony at Ceres drifted through her thoughts. She had failed to protect those innocents back then, but maybe she could protect countless more now. If it meant bending the Council's rules, or even breaking them, so be it. Her conscience demanded she fight for understanding, for genuine peace. What she didn't know was who else might be watching, monitoring her every keystroke. For in the dark labyrinth of the Council's hidden agendas, not everyone wanted the same outcome she did. And her small act of defiance would ripple further than she could possibly predict. A blaring alarm cut through the gloom of Lunar Base Horizon's overnight cycle, red emergency lights painting the corridors in shifting shadows. Nadia Abbott, jolted from a half-doze in her office, spilled the remnants of cold synth tea across her desk. She shot upright, heart hammering, as her comm unit buzzed with frantic voices. This is Tactical Command. Report of an explosion aboard the ESS Aegis. Repeating, an explosion aboard the ESS Aegis. The words registered like a physical blow. Nadia yanked on a jacket and sprinted for the nearest transport pod, her mind racing. Less than a day ago, she had stood face-to-face with Admiral Kronos Durov, hearing the unyielding conviction in his plan for Earth's absolute deterrence. Now, sabotage, on Earth's most formidable warship, threatened to tip the system's delicate balance into chaos. When Nadia arrived at the station's external docking bay, the commotion was deafening. Military officers barked orders. Technicians scrambled to secure compartments battered by decompression. The ESS Aegis, moored off the station's perimeter, glimmered under emergency floodlights. The rising haze of vented atmosphere looked like a veil of ghostly mist circling its hull. Admiral Durov himself stepped off a smaller shuttle, accompanied by armed security. His usually composed demeanor cracked with fury. A sabotage device, he barked into a group of Terran officers, planted near an auxiliary power junction. Casualties minimal. But the Aegis is compromised, and we will find the perpetrators. Nadia approached, breathing fast. Admiral, do we have confirmation of who's responsible? Durov glowered, eyes flicking over her. A group claiming loyalty to the Horian Alliance has already broadcast a message taking credit. Whether it's genuine or not remains to be seen, but we have more than enough cause to treat it as an alien-backed terror act. A swirl of dread seized Nadia's chest. The Horian Alliance was one of the more outspoken alien blocs that had condemned Earth's secret fleet, but they were not known for outright violence. Isn't it suspicious they would reveal themselves so readily? She pressed. It could be a false flag meant to rally support for. Enough, Officer Abbott, Durov snapped, cutting her off. His anger radiated like heat. We've coddled enough alien sensibilities. The evidence speaks for itself, and so do the burned hull plates on my ship. He pivoted to a stern-faced Counselor 1, who had just arrived, and Nadia withdrew. She could sense Durov's patience with diplomacy fading by the minute, replaced by a grim resolve to retaliate. As the two men conferred in hushed, urgent tones, the gloom around them thickened with tension. The ESS Aegis, branded unstoppable just days ago, stood damaged and vulnerable, a sign to all that even Earth's might wasn't invincible. Long after the immediate crisis management ended, Nadia found herself in a cramped briefing chamber, debriefing the council and a handful of key advisors. Holoscreens displayed footage of the charred power junction, swirling sparks of residual electricity dancing over the twisted metal. Experts pointed out blast residue that supposedly matched Horian energy signatures. A hush fell as more analysis poured in. If the sabotage had struck closer to the main reactor, the resulting detonation could have leveled half the ship, killing hundreds and crippling Earth's new flagship. I've just come from an emergency session with Admiral Durov, Counselor 1 said gravely, rubbing his temples in exhaustion. He wants to move the fleet into defensive formation around the Sol system's perimeter. He's also pushing to interrogate any alien nationals on lunar base horizon with remote ties to the Horian Alliance. A ripple of discomfort passed through the chamber. Nadia stiffened. That approach will only worsen interstellar relations, she cautioned. We still don't know if the Horian Alliance itself orchestrated this sabotage. All we have is a vague claim. This could be a splinter faction, or it could be a carefully arranged deception to frame them. Counselor Jorgsen interrupted. We should at least consider. One cut him off, voice tight with strain. Durov won't care about speculation. As far as he's concerned, any threat is reason enough for him to tighten security. And he has the fleet at his disposal. They all exchanged anxious looks. Everyone had heard the swirling rumors that an alien coalition, panicked by Earth's secret warships, was assembling in a hidden star sector. Whether the sabotage was real, staged, or something in between, it would be seen as further evidence of hostility on both sides. War's specter loomed closer with every passing hour. Outside the meeting, the station's corridors crackled with uneasy energy. Nadia rushed through the diplomatic center, trying to calm frantic envoys who feared mass retaliation against their people. Some brought old grudges to the surface, recollecting Terran expansions that displaced their colonies or overshadowed their resource claims. Fear layered upon decades of suspicion, fueling smoldering hatred. This is precisely what I feared, an elder Cater representative lamented, his green-flecked eyes haunted. Earth's might forced our worlds to react. Now, in their desperation, some among our own may take violent measures. A Horian trade emissary, one of the few Horian citizens still on base, trembled in a corner, shielded by station security from an angry mob of Terran workers. We had nothing to do with that explosion, she insisted, voice breaking. Now they call us terrorists just because of our birthright. Nadia bent down, gently placing a hand on the emissary's shoulder. "I believe you," she said softly. "We'll get to the truth." But each time she told someone this, the weight of the lie pressed heavier. In a climate of retribution and suspicion, would truth even matter? Hours later, the base began broadcasting an emergency galactic bulletin. Alien warships under a rumored coalition of restraint were gathering resources and fueling for departure from the fringes of known space. Distress calls poured into Luna's comm center from Terran outposts that worried about being caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, undisclosed memos from Durov's circle hinted he was drafting contingencies for a potential preemptive strike if the coalition came within range. In the flicker of half-lit corridors, Nadia read the transmissions with growing horror. Each line, each rumor, confirmed her worst fears. Earth's show of force, meant to secure peace, had goaded others into forging bigger, bolder responses. And now, with a sabotage attempt fueling Earth's indignation, the chance for calm negotiation shrank by the minute. She thought of the colony at Ceres, how swiftly tensions had escalated from resentment to violence. Only this time, the stage wasn't a small asteroid settlement. It was the entire galaxy. Yet, as dire as it seemed, Nadia clung to a shred of hope. She recalled the back-channel messages she'd sent after meeting with Admiral Durov. Replies had trickled in, delicate, cautious, but full of promise. There were alien leaders out there who didn't want war any more than she did, who believed a last-minute compromise might still be possible. She composed new messages now, heart-pounding, urging them to keep their fleets from merging with the rumored coalition, to stand down, to meet on neutral ground. If only the flame of reason could outrun the blaze of fear. Outside, in the infinite darkness of space, the ESS Aegis turned its battered hull toward Neptune, flanked by dozens of Terran warships on high alert. Within hours, they would form a protective cordon around Sol, Earth, and every human settlement. Rumors of lockdowns, forced relocations, and even martial law coursed through the station. The seeds of war had been planted, and Nadia feared they were beginning to sprout with alarming speed. Her last thought, as she collapsed from mental and physical exhaustion onto a small cot in her office, was that any spark in this tinderbox, another sabotage, a hasty retaliation, a single misguided shot, could ignite a conflict that engulfed all civilized space. And no one, not even Earth's mighty new fleet, would emerge unscathed. The emergency corridors of Lunar Base Horizon were awash in warning lights, painting the metallic walls in pulsing streaks of red. Nadia Abbott could hear the rapid footsteps of station security, the panicked murmurs of staff, and the ceaseless beep of incoming alerts on her wrist comm. Every moment felt like a countdown, ratcheting toward an inevitable confrontation, one that could spark a war none of them were prepared to face. She stepped into a wide atrium near the base's central command, where a barrage of holographic displays dominated the space. Each screen projected updates from the outer edges of the Sol system. Terran warships in high formation, their engines emitting ghostly glows against the night of space. Alien vessels massing in distant regions, on the cusp of crossing into Earth's domain. She paused to scan the swirl of data, ship IDs, deployment rosters, something about skirmishes near a contested star corridor. The information blurred, her mind nearly overwhelmed. A booming voice snapped her out of it. "Officer Abbott, over here." Counselor 1, flanked by a team of aides, beckoned her to a private side room where the Terran Defense Council convened in frantic session. The counselors were in mid-debate, voices crackling with urgency through multiple live channels. Counselor Jorgson, "We cannot afford to wait for the alien coalition to strike first. A preemptive show of force might be our only chance." Counselor 1, "And risk confirming their worst fears about our intentions? That's madness. We should redouble our diplomatic channels. Nadia, speak up." All eyes pivoted to her as she entered. Nadia took a steadying breath, her mind racing. She had evidence, albeit fragmentary, suggesting that the sabotage on the ESS Aegis might not have been an alien-led act after all. Several hours earlier, an anonymous source had slipped a data keycard into her coat pocket. The file it contained was heavily encrypted, but the partial information revealed traces of Terran-coded transmissions that predated the sabotage. Could there be a rogue human faction trying to accelerate conflict for their own reasons? "Counselors, Nadia began, voice firm. We might be dealing with a deliberate attempt to inflame tensions, possibly orchestrated from within our own ranks. I'm receiving intelligence that contradicts Admiral Durov's assertion of alien responsibility. We need to slow down, verify the facts. A flurry of murmurs rippled through the room. One or two counselors looked as though Nadia had plunged a dagger into their collective certainty. Others seemed incredulous. Counselor Jorgson, Officer Abbott, do you realize you're essentially accusing Terran conspirators of harming our flagship? Nadia, I'm not accusing anyone yet, only pointing out that things aren't as black and white as the saboteur's public statements suggest. We owe it to ourselves and the galaxy to investigate, rather than leap to war. Before the discussion could deepen, a stern voice slid through the half-open door. We have no time for conspiratorial theories, Officer Abbott. Admiral Kronos Durov strode in, regal in his dark uniform, exuding an air of unshakable confidence. Every counselor gave way, like reeds bending beneath a sudden gust. Durov's eyes locked onto Nadia's, cool and unyielding. Durov, I've listened to your concerns, Ms. Abbott, and trust me when I say we've run our checks. The sabotage was clearly aimed at crippling Earth's deterrent. Whether the culprits had outside help or not, the alien coalition is gathering force. If we hesitate, they'll strike first. He pressed a control on his wrist. A holographic projection of the outer solar system flared to life above the council table. Multiple blips showed alien flotillas moving closer to designated jump points, forming lines of potential incursion. Durov, pointing to the largest concentration of alien ships, we've identified at least 6 cruisers and 2 dreadnoughts amassing in the Talmoran Rift. They have enough firepower to ravage our outer colonies. We must act decisively. Counselor Wen opened his mouth to protest, but Durov raised a hand. I've convened a war council aboard the ESS Aegis. I expect the Defense Council to endorse my recommendation. Deploy the secret fleet to form a defensive perimeter around Earth's orbit and engage any unrecognized vessels crossing the threshold. A tense silence coalesced like a heavy fog. Nadia's heart thudded. She understood the fear driving Durov's strategy. If an alien coalition attacked en masse, Earth could suffer catastrophic losses. Yet she also sensed how quickly a defensive posture could mutate into an offensive strike. One accidental discharge, one misread signal, and the system could erupt into total conflict. Summoning her courage, she spoke. Admiral, there's still a chance for a summit. Several alien delegates are receptive to last-minute talks if we can guarantee safe passage and a neutral site. It's not too late. Durov's gaze pinned her in place. Diplomacy has its place, he said coldly. But I will not stake human survival on the slim hope that these aliens are anything other than opportunists. They see an injured beast. They want blood. Blood. The word made Nadia flinch inwardly. She stepped away from the table, resisting the impulse to shout. She needed a better tactic to convince him. I've received word from the Shulian High Council, she said, keeping her tone composed. They're willing to attend a peace conference, even now. If they're truly bent on war, why offer to talk at all? Durov narrowed his eyes. Could be a ploy to gain time. Still, you're certain they want to meet. That's what their envoy relayed to me, Nadia said. They'd prefer neutral ground, but they're open to establishing direct lines with us immediately. The Admiral considered, jaw tense. Fine, he finally said. I'll give you one chance, Ms. Abbott. Convince them to schedule negotiations within the next few hours. In that time, I'll hold my fire. If they fail to arrive or make demands, I'll proceed with Plan A, full operational readiness. Relief flashed through Nadia, though she knew the clock was now ticking. Yes, Admiral. Thank you. Without further ceremony, Durov turned on his heel and exited, his entourage trailing behind like stern shadows. Counselor Wen let out a shaky sigh. You've bought us a reprieve, Nadia, but it's razor thin. If the aliens don't show up, or if anything else goes wrong, Durov will strike before anyone can protest. Nadia wasted no time. She rushed to a quiet comm station she'd secured away from the bustling diplomatic center. It was little more than a cramped alcove with flickering consoles, usually used for minor data transfers. She fed in the codes she'd gathered from her discreet network of off-world contacts. Her heart pounded with each beep of the encryption handshake. She was reaching out to the Zulians, the Andar Alliance, the Kader Federation, anyone influential who might sway the rest of the uneasy coalition. As she pleaded her case for an immediate summit, 1,000 obstacles swirled in her mind. Could the sabotage claims hamper any trust? Would they risk traveling into Terran space, possibly walking into a trap? Gradually, responses trickled back. The Zulians agreed to dispatch their senior ambassador. The Andar Alliance, still reeling from the fleet's revelation, sent only a junior envoy, but that was better than nothing. Some refused outright, stating that Earth's duplicity had shattered all faith in Terran negotiations. Others insisted that Durov must stand down entirely before they'd even consider a meeting. Yet, even as she secured a fragile commitment from a handful of representatives, news poured in of scattered border clashes, small, tense encounters in which Terran vessels engaged unidentified scout ships. No casualties had been reported yet, but the margin for error was microscopic. Any single laser volley or misread movement could become the spark that ignited a system-wide conflagration. As time bled away, Nadia's console crackled to life. A holographic silhouette of the Shulian ambassador shimmered over the transmitter. "Officer Abbott," a translator's voice intoned, "we accept your invitation to preliminary talks, but we require reassurance that Admiral Durov's forces won't open fire upon our vessels." "I'll do everything in my power to guarantee your safety," Nadia vowed. "We have a window, just a few hours, before Earth's military enacts its next protocol. Please, if you can convince others, we might avoid a catastrophe." The hologram flickered out. Nadia sat back, head throbbing. She had effectively pledged what minimal diplomatic power she had, hoping Durov wouldn't renege on his word in the heat of battle. The name Project Aegis haunted her thoughts, reminding her how heavily Earth had relied on secrecy. Now that secrecy had metastasized into suspicion, distrust, and an imminent showdown. Finally, she turned from the console, exhausted yet determined. She had done all she could to broker a last-ditch peace meeting. The next hours would be the real crucible, a reckoning of whether Earth's might and the galaxy's fear would inevitably collide, or whether a glimmer of hope might still break through the storm. As she walked away from the comm station, she felt the station's heartbeat around her, buzzing alarms, urgent footfalls, controlled chaos at every turn. If her efforts failed, by dawn's first light over Luna's horizon, the entire galaxy might be aflame. Nadia Abbott felt the hum of tension beneath her feet as she stepped onto the orbital docking platform that circled the ESS Aegis. The artificial gravity thrummed in uneven pulses, a testament to the recent sabotage that had ravaged the flagship. Repair drones zipped along the vessel's outer hull, welding patches over blackened armor plating. Despite the lingering damage, there was no mistaking the starship's colossal presence, its silhouette stretching far into the void, an awe-inspiring symbol of Earth's hidden might. She moved toward a waiting shuttle, where two stern-faced Terran security officers confirmed her credentials before allowing her to board. Admiral Kronos Durov had summoned Nadia for what he termed a final chance at negotiation with the alien coalition. She hadn't been given much detail, only that a handful of delegates, swayed by her frantic communications, had agreed to meet aboard the ESS Aegis. It was a narrow, perilous step toward peace, but better than the planet-killing alternative. The shuttle's engines whirred, carrying her across a short span of open space and into the massive ship's docking bay. Inside, the atmosphere was militaristic precision. Soldiers in crisp uniforms, corridors bathed in a soft white glow, and the faint scent of ozone from the ship's advanced shield generators. Nadia sensed more tension than usual, an undercurrent of readiness. Every trooper seemed poised for combat, eyes scanning for the slightest provocation. A tall officer escorted her to the designated conference hall. Entering, she found a circular room that had been hastily outfitted with negotiation tables. Officers in black uniforms lined the walls, handguns and rifles conspicuously displayed. At the far end stood Admiral Durov, his presence commanding as ever in that immaculate uniform. But it was the small knot of alien delegates near him that seized Nadia's attention. She recognized the gaunt, shimmering skin of the Shulian ambassador immediately. Beside the ambassador stood a squat Andar emissary, fidgeting with a ring of silver beads that served as both jewelry and translator device. Several other envoys hovered nearby, each from species that had received Nadia's desperate entreaties. Their faces displayed a mix of wariness and resolution. They were here, but every fiber of their being screamed caution. Durov turned, inclined his head with cold civility. "Officer Abbott," he said, "our guests have questions regarding Earth's intentions. You've long insisted that diplomacy can prevail. Let's see if you can deliver." For a moment, Nadia's throat felt dry. She could sense the precariousness of this meeting. One wrong word, one sign of threat, and the delegates would bolt for their shuttles, possibly to join the warships rumored to be mustering in the Talmoran Rift. The future of the Sol system, perhaps the galaxy, hinged on what happened in this chamber. "Welcome," she said softly, focusing first on the aliens. She spoke in standard, letting the translator devices handle the rest. "I'm aware our sudden unveiling of the Terran secret fleet has shaken the trust we've tried to build over decades. But we stand here, now hoping to step back from the brink." A Shulian representative, tall and ethereal, flicked an iridescent gaze toward Durov. "How can we trust you when your admiral chooses intimidation over dialogue?" Durov's expression tightened. Before he could respond with his usual austere retort, Nadia quickly interjected. "Tensions have escalated on all sides," she said, carefully. "There's credible evidence suggesting the sabotage on the ESS Aegis may have been orchestrated to provoke our mutual fear. Someone, perhaps a faction operating without the full endorsement of any government, wanted to ensure we'd never reach this point of understanding." A ripple of surprise coursed among the alien envoys. One of them, the Andar emissary, clasped his silver-beaded ring nervously. "Do you have proof?" Nadia drew a small data disk from her jacket. "This contains encrypted transmissions indicating Earth-based signals were detected near the sabotage site before the bomb detonated. Signals that do not match any known alien code. We suspect a splinter group or rogue element. I'm sharing it with you now, in the hope that transparency might start to mend the rift." She handed the data disk to a technician stationed by the delegates. A hush fell over the room as the technician inserted it into a hollow projector. Ghostly lines of code and timestamps flickered, partially obscured by encryption. Though incomplete, the fragments were telling. The tension in the conference hall seemed to shift, as if the weight of suspicion had been incrementally lifted from the alien coalition. Admiral Durov's gaze swept across the data, something like uncertainty flickering behind his steely eyes. This was the first time he was seeing concrete evidence that might refute his tightly held assumption of purely alien malice. Nadia felt his stare bore into her, but she pressed on. "The galaxy is vast," she said, pitching her voice to the entire group. "We all harbor factions and extremists who don't speak for the majority. Humanity is no exception. If the sabotage was meant to ignite a war, then the question is, will we let fear rule us?" Silence reigned. Slowly, the Shulian ambassador tilted their head. Then, "Officer Abbott, tell us what you propose. Are you suggesting a collective investigation? A freeze on military escalations?" "Both," Nadia replied without hesitation. "I propose that Earth and willing members of your coalition form a joint investigation team to uncover the truth behind this sabotage. In exchange, Earth can stand down from sending its fleet to the outer perimeter, and the coalition can likewise pause any approach towards Sol." Durov's eyes narrowed. He could not deny Nadia's logic. Yet he didn't appreciate the notion of tethering Earth's military power. "Officer Abbott's intentions are noble," he said, voice cool. "But how do we know your coalition won't use this lull to stage a surprise attack?" An uneasy murmur spread among the alien delegates, offended by the accusation. Nadia felt the fragile connection about to fray. She calmly turned to Durov. "Admiral," she said, measuring her words, "our best chance to avoid a galaxy-wide conflict is to prove that Earth desires cooperation, not conquest. And if we uncover evidence that the sabotage was indeed a false flag operation, we can focus on the real aggressors, rather than waging war against potential allies." The Admiral's features remained resolute, but a silence hung between them. All eyes watched him, waiting to see if he'd allow the glimmer of peace to persist, or quash it in favor of a preemptive strike. Seconds felt like hours. At last, he let out a breath, turning his gaze back to the Zulians and the others. "Very well," he said. "I won't move the fleet beyond Lunar Base Horizon's boundaries for the time being. In return, you do not advance your forces any closer to Sol. We investigate together, but if there's any sign of betrayal. The air in the room seemed to shift from one heart-stopping beat to the next, as if a major turning point had just been sealed. The Shulian ambassador lifted their slender arms in a gesture of cautious agreement. One by one, the other envoys nodded. Nadia's pulse pounded with a heady mix of relief and trepidation. It was the slimmest chance at true peace, but a chance nonetheless. Aboard the ESS Aegis, the tension was palpable as everyone processed the implications. Officers who had trained for combat now had to pivot to a precarious ceasefire. Alien emissaries readied coded messages to inform their waiting fleets. Counselors hovering near the edges of the conference hall exchanged hushed remarks about how this would affect Earth's already fragile political landscape. Later, as the delegates departed to send word back to their governments, Nadia escorted them to the docking bay. She saw the weight of uncertainty in every step they took, balanced by a flicker of hope in their eyes. No one dared speak of victory yet, but at least they could speak and not open fire. Near the exit hatch, Nadia paused, gazing upon the swirling panorama of stars through a transparent observation window. This was the frontier she had always dreamed of, a galaxy united, however tenuously. How quickly it had nearly fallen apart, threatened by hidden agendas, fear, and the desperate scramble for survival. For a moment, she let herself believe that the worst was behind them. But Admiral Durov's figure appeared beside her reflection, imposing and restless. "Mark my words, Officer Abbott," he said quietly. "If these delegates so much as flinch the wrong way, I will not hesitate." Nadia kept her eyes on the stars. "I understand, Admiral, but you gave your word. Let's pray none of us has reason to break it." She could feel his tension thrumming like a live wire, but he offered no rebuttal. Instead, he turned sharply and disappeared down the corridor. Nadia lingered a moment longer, letting the station's cool recycled air fill her lungs. The secret fleet, the threatened alien coalition, the sabotage, everything had converged here, and somehow, they had arrived at an uneasy stalemate instead of the apocalypse. A fleeting thought drifted through her mind. Were they truly on the path to peace, or simply one misstep away from plunging into the void? In that uncertain space, the seeds of war remained, lying dormant. Only time would tell if they would bloom into destruction, or be uprooted by the fragile promise of unity they'd forged tonight. Light spilled through the ESS Aegis's observation panels, casting long, golden streaks across the conference hall's once tense floors. Gone were the armed guards lining the walls, replaced by the weary but hopeful presence of Terran mediators and alien envoys. Word had spread that a provisional ceasefire agreement was finally at hand. Nadia Abbott sat at the center table, digital documents glowing before her. She'd spent countless hours over the past few days working with Shulian, Andar, and Kater representatives, plus a scattering of smaller factions, to hammer out terms for a joint investigation into the sabotage that nearly ignited an interstellar war. Despite lingering anxieties, the synergy in the room was palpable. "Shulian Ambassador, we appreciate the open exchange of information you have offered, Officer Abbott. It has led us to a better understanding of the forces that sought to manipulate us all." The ambassador's luminous gaze turned to the mirrored display on the table. Fragments of decoded transmissions flickered there, revealing the faint outlines of a rogue Terran operation, likely an extremist splinter group bent on fanning hostilities for profit or political gain. Although the files didn't name every conspirator, they solidified the theory that the sabotage aboard the ESS Aegis was never authorized by alien governments. Admiral Kronos Durov stood at the periphery, arms folded, his usually rigid stance somewhat softened. The new evidence had forced him to temper his suspicions of purely alien aggression. He still exuded the same formidable air, yet he seemed less inclined to posture, almost relieved that Earth's security need not rely on perpetual brinkmanship. "Durov, I still intend to protect humanity," he said calmly, sensing the eyes on him. "But I will honor our pact. No Terran vessel shall cross beyond the designated neutral zone, so long as your fleets hold position as agreed." The alien envoys exchanged careful nods. Trust would be slow to rebuild, but this was a start. At Nadia's urging, a Peace and Clarity Commission was formally proposed, a shared investigative body with members from Earth and various star systems. pledged to ferret out the last threads of subterfuge behind the Aegis bombing. The delegates expressed guarded optimism, each signing the foundational documents with stylus or scanner, unique gestures representing their civilizations. A hush followed that final signature. Counselors, aides, and ambassadors alike exhaled in collective relief, as though a massive weight had lifted off the chamber's air. Quiet clapping broke out, tentative at first, then building into a chorus of applause that echoed against the vaulted ceiling. Before leaving the ESS Aegis, the visiting envoys passed through one of the ship's grand observation corridors. There, the view of distant stars and planetary spheres was mesmerizing. Sol's bright glow, Luna's silvery curve, and Earth spinning serenely in the background. Nadia accompanied them, answering final questions. At one point, the Andar emissary approached her, silver translator beads tinkling softly. "The road ahead will not be easy," the emissary said, voice lowered. "Suspicion lingers in every corner of the galaxy. But we have you to thank for steering us away from annihilation." Nadia shook her head modestly. "It's the willingness of all parties to talk that prevented tragedy. I just tried to keep the conversation alive." The emissary offered a warm glance in return. "If our peoples share the same determination, perhaps we can eventually move beyond this crisis to a genuine alliance." The Shuyan ambassador added in agreement. "The seeds of war can just as easily become the seeds of understanding, if nurtured with honesty." This fiasco might have a silver lining yet. With the alien delegations safely departed, Admiral Durov requested a private word with Nadia. They met in the corridor outside the command bridge, where repair crews still hustled to address lingering damage from the sabotage. Durov gazed at the scaffolding overhead, his expression pensive. "Durov, it appears you've proven me wrong, at least for now. We're standing on a razor's edge, Ms. Abbott, but you and your idealism have kept the galaxy from toppling into war." "Nadia, I'm not against preparedness, Admiral. I understand the need for caution. But trust only has a chance to form if we're willing to meet halfway. I appreciate that you did, even reluctantly." Durov's lips twitched in the barest hint of a smile. "Diplomacy isn't a perfect shield, but I see now it's a powerful tool. Time will tell if these alliances hold." They walked together toward the airlock, the hum of the ESS Aegis's engine core pulsing beneath their feet. Nadia let her gaze roam across the warship's corridors, recalling the initial terror she'd felt when the fleet was revealed. That terror hadn't vanished, but it was tempered by the knowledge that Earth was not alone in wanting peace. It was a delicate equilibrium, a hidden might, tempered by open dialogue. If well-balanced, it could stabilize the galaxy. Days later, Nadia found herself back on Lunar Base Horizon, stepping onto a dais in the Diplomatic Center's main auditorium. The newly minted Peace and Clarity Commission members, Terran and alien alike, had gathered to coordinate their next steps, including the pursuit of whoever orchestrated the sabotage. Media from various star systems hovered at a respectful distance, capturing the moment. Murmurs of cautious hope passed among them. From the dais, Nadia addressed the assembly. "We stand here with an opportunity to reshape our corner of the galaxy. The unveiling of Earth's secret fleet and the sabotage that followed nearly fractured our alliances beyond repair. But through mutual effort, we've uncovered the seeds of deception planted by those who thrive on fear. Our task now is to uproot those seeds, together, and ensure that if the galaxy panics again, it's not because of secrets and suspicion, but because of the unimaginable possibilities we can achieve as allies." A ripple of applause swept the chamber. Counselor 1, present as Earth's official liaison, nodded approval. Alien representatives clapped in their own cultural manner, some with silent gestures, some with chirping vocalizations that might sound strange to human ears but conveyed mutual support. No one pretended the threat was over. The galaxy was still rife with tension, conspiracies, and hidden agendas. Yet the precarious unity taking root was reason enough to believe they might avert another cataclysm. Stepping down from the podium, Nadia caught Admiral Durov's gaze from across the room. He offered her a curt nod, an acknowledgement that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back. Earth's might was no longer secret, and that revelation had forever changed humanity's standing among the stars. And so, as Lunar Base Horizon resumed its daily hum of trade, politics, and interspecies exchange, the galaxy braced itself for a new era, one in which transparency, however challenging, held more promise than hidden fleets and silent dread. For Nadia Abbott, it felt like the second dawn of her life's mission, to ensure that hope, not fear, guided humanity's steps into the cosmic frontier.